All right, today's the day, and this is the final episode of 2020. And I bet everybody's hoping that everything's the final episode of 2020, moving on to hopefully bigger and better things in 2021. As we have in the last few weeks, been wrapping up a few things, and today we're going to be looking at the hood, or the bonnet, whatever you want to call it. The front clamshell, I guess is the proper name for it. As if you remember, we did cover the first initial layers in that and laid that up in the mold. It's been sitting over in the corner, and today we finished it. Well, not quite finished. We will find out once it's out of the mold if we have some flex in some areas we still want to stiffen up, but it is pretty far along, so we're going to be finishing that up, popping it out of the mold. Anyway, let's go take a look at that. So one of the things we're going to do in these last laminations is put some structural pieces in to stiffen up this clamshell. And I've cut these pieces of foam out on the table saw, and you can see the saw marks here. So to bring them a little more perfection, we're going to sand them down and make them nice, smooth, and round, because we also want the round edge so that our fiberglass can transition across these pieces. Now, I've tried hot wire cutters and other things to create these kind of pieces, but find that this is the very best way, is just to cut them out, sand them to shape. The sanding seems to leave a nice smooth surface on here rather than like a hot wire cutter, which leaves kind of a hard stubble. But we're just going to place these here to show you where they're going to go. But before they get actually installed, we need to go and put a couple of layers, or a couple more base layers that those foam cores will actually bond to. And of course, the first one here is around the headlights. This little thin area around the headlights, only about 1.25 inches wide. And with the two flanges, one coming off the headlight, one off the edge of the clamshell here, it's kind of a difficult place to work, but we're going to put a bunch of unidirectional fibers through there. And then some regular fiberglass, of course, to consolidate the unidirectional and to make it nice and smooth and pretty. And we're also going to work up under the little sheet metal flange there and around the headlight itself, building up just a couple more layers to give us our little flange around the headlight. Now, it's always good to put these little pieces that you have to go up against these flanges. It's always easier to work in little tiny pieces of cloth. Using large pieces of cloth just never seem to work. They tend to snag in the resin and pucker up, and you can't work them out. Of course, the option is always, if you had the ability to install this stuff dry and then put your resin in like you would in an infusion, you could do that by using large pieces of glass. But here in this situation, you have to use smaller pieces, and of course, the bigger the better. So once we've gotten all the fine details worked around in all the flanges and the headlights, I'm going to go ahead and start putting in some of the larger sheets of glass to make things a little bit smoother and tidy. But notice still, even when I come across these little protrusions, these bumps, we're going to call them the nose holes, you have to trim around them because the glass will not make a double compound curve. You can usually get it to fold once and go around an object, but then back down, you have to have a twill fiber to be able to do that. So in this plain weave S-glass cloth, we're just going to put it down. And here I'll show you again on this side what I was talking about with the cuts. You come up against it, you can make one bend, but you have to make that cut right there to get that to fit around it. Now to fix that, we don't want to have too many layers where we had to cut it around some particular bend in their mold. So what we're going to do is just to make sure or verify that we don't have any cuts or too many cuts ending up on the same bend, we're going to go ahead now, and I've done this before in other layers, but we're going to put a twill fabric which conforms to the curves much better around those little protrusions, the nose holes. So finishing up this one piece of plain weave S-glass here, going to go to that. And notice here I can do a couple of cuts, but then the fabric will fold around all the bends and then flip that fold back over the top. And I have a piece of fabric there that covers and doesn't have any cuts along any of the corners. Kind of ties everything together, make sure we don't have any weak spots on a hard bend like that. And that gets us just about to having our finished surface. And you didn't see me put them in place, but drop those foam in there and put some weights on top of it and then let it cure overnight. Come back the next day, I can take all my little scrap metal weights off. And that foam should be stuck down. We need it to be stuck down because we are going to be brushing up against it and probably pushing pretty hard with our brush to make sure we get our fabric pushed up against it tight. They're all bonded in place good. Before we can actually do that lamination over that foam, of course, again, we have to get our sander out and start scuffing the surface up. Again, I'll just mention the scuffing is to make sure that we get a good bond between the layers. It's also good to be able to go through, sometimes when you're fiberglassing, you'll get little things that poke up and they'll just hold the fiberglass from laying flat. So you just go ahead and scuff it up, knock those high points down. Go around, work it really good. Of course, this was kind of a pain sanding up against this soft foam, so you just have to be careful. But we got it all scuffed up. Now it's just a matter of cleaning this thing up, get ready for the final laminations over the foam and a finished layer to make it nice and pretty. You'll see I've got the V shaped up there. That's going to be up against by the windshield. I got a little tiny one that runs between the nose holes and then one up against what we'll call the lip, right where the intake for our radiator is going to be. Once we get this thing clean, time to start laminating. And we've covered this before, but going through it again, put down some resin, go back, start laying our cloth. Now we're putting down a layer of cloth that's just about maybe 1.5 inches wider than our foam. And then the next layer we put down will be probably 2 inches wider than our foam. And we'll just keep putting down. Each layer is going to be just a little bit wider. That's just to make sure that we don't have layers of cloth that terminate in the same position. And if you did that, they would end up kind of creating a curve, a little high ridge. But if we stagger the width of the fiberglass, then each one kind of lays out and tapers out. Otherwise, if we go back, have to add some more layers, want to go scuff it again, we have to work hard to break that curve down, to feather it out, to make sure our fiberglass again will lay smooth against it. So like I said, just cut your fiberglass a little bit larger each time, and then it lays out, will taper out and not leave a curb. But we're going to get this 3 layers on top of this foam, and then we're going to go ahead and put a final layer over the top of it, and that final layer is going to be the largest piece of cloth that we can manage to work. Going back to our structural S-glass cloth is going to work it out, and we're just going to keep covering this whole thing best we can. This, of course, is going to be our tidy layer because we're hoping that we're complete here. And if you get larger pieces with less seams or lapping edges, it'll all look much prettier when you open that clamshell, look underneath. You'll just see the texture of the fiberglass. Like I said, large pieces just going to cover this whole thing, and each piece is going to come across and add one more layer to our foam cores as well. And here it is, ready to come out of the mold. All right, so there you have the front clamshell out of the mold. And hopefully this coming new year, we will be bringing all of the parts out of the mold, getting things to the assembly stage. That is our goal, is to get this thing assembled this year, running it on the road. Anyway, we'll see what we do, but we have made a good strides getting there this year. So, hope you had a good time this year, and we will see you at the beginning of next year with some new and interesting projects. Anyway, thanks for stopping by this time. Come back, see us again.